My name is Abbie Amey, and I'm the moderator today. So I'm going to introduce everybody. I'm going to ask them a few questions. I'm going to get a bit of discussion going. And then we know that we've got an amazing audience with us today. So we're very pleased to have you. And we know that you will have questions and comments. So we're going to leave plenty of time for that as well. Okay? This is Aysen Dennis. Aysen is known as the Queen of the Aylesbury Estate. We're delighted to have her here. She's an activist. She's known for her work defending public housing and the rights of local communities. She's been on many a campaign. She's fought Southwark Council and won single-handedly, very much. She's been one of key figures in the campaign against the demolition of the Aylesbury Estate, continues to address issues of social justice, inequality, and the loss of urban space through her community-based initiatives. And she's, after her successful legal action against Southwark Council, the judge in the case, and I'm sure Aysen's going to tell us a little bit more about that case, said, "This judgment should serve as a warning to developers who disregard historical master plans and the promises they make the communities in the process of gentrification." Thaddeus Zupančič?
Yeah, that's
If you're talking about social housing at all, there are 2 books you need to read. And I'm delighted to say we have both the writers here today. You have to read this by Thaddeus, and you have to read this by John Brothel, who's also here.
Could you pass them around?
We could pass them around.
Yeah, sure.
Yep. So Thaddeus is a writer, translator, and photographer. He's the author of London Estates, which we're passing around, Modernist Council Housing from 1946 to 1981, which shows 275 modernist housing estates across London, which he dedicatedly photographed beautifully for us all.
Clem.
Oh,
Clem.
okay. Yeah. His work highlights the ambition and innovation of post-war municipal housing, and he's a big fan of London Council Estates, and will tell us a lot about them, I'm sure. Clem Cecil is, again, we're very pleased to have here. She's an expert in many things. She's a writer, researcher, cultural producer. She was the Times Moscow correspondent. She co-founded the Moscow Architecture Preservation Society. She's campaigned and written about buildings for many years, and the present book that she's working on at the moment is about childlessness. So we're delighted to have here. And finally, last but not least, Pavel Otdelnov. Pavel is the artist of this gorgeous work. He's London-based. He's won multiple awards. He's worked across painting and multimedia, explores industrial landscapes and Soviet and post-Soviet history. His projects combine incredible archival research. I can tell you this because I've researched some things with him, and you would not believe the lengths to which he goes, the places you get to visit, the people you get to meet. He also specializes in spatial installations, and one of the great things about knowing Pavel is you get to see the world differently. You might be on what you think is an ordinary London street, and then you suddenly realize, no, it's something else, which, as I think you can see from this exhibition. So I think I'm going to start with Thaddeus and just ask you, what started your interest in council housing in London?
Firstly, thank you very much for the invitation. Secondly, congratulations, Pavel. I mean, it's a brilliant show. is just extraordinary. I mean, it will probably sound slightly preposterous, actually, but it is the feeling of the estate, actually, that are encapsulated and preserved, actually, in your paintings, quite in a quite extraordinary manner. And thank you for the question, and quite in the introduction as well. It is slightly interesting looking at the panel. British, living London-based, as you pointed out, actually, as we are. There is a very peculiar thing, actually, for the continental Europeans and people moving to London, actually. When you move to London, what they recognize a few icons. They recognize Big Ben, they recognize Houses of Parliament, Buckingham Palace, and they recognize council housing, because this is where we feel at home. And this is a tradition, this is a post-war tradition, both in Europe and in the United Kingdom as well. And we play with our history at peril, because, I mean, we keep forgetting, and we should never really forget how these things came about. They are not they didn't come about because somebody snapped with their fingers and simply said, now we're going to build. No, it was preparation, it was planning, it was architectural work, and it was building. Not always fantastically successful. There were always problems for some reason, but then we come to the main question, what these buildings are. And these buildings, as John Boughton always keeps repeating, and quite rightly so, they provide homes. And homes is what we are actually fighting for. And on your t-shirts it says council housing. It is council homes. It is, and that affected me, actually. I didn't know much about the structure of the building processes in this country. I learned that, actually, just like Pavel did, I mean, with research, we go into archives, you do learn things. Actually, a lot of things are in the books, but a lot of things are not in the books. And you really have to do old-fashioned footwork, archives, photographs, visiting estates. And then you learn, actually, what is the difference, what works, what doesn't work. What attracted me was, I mean, that yes, I mean, most of this, it is the statistic that I like repeating, actually, between 1945 and 1980, 47 of all council housing was built in the United Kingdom. 47%. Not before the war, with all the progress, I mean, not in the 80s or the 90s, but in really limited period between 1945 and 1980. It was mostly idiomatically modernism, because modernist buildings, because it was time of high modernism, brutalism as well. And when people say, oh yeah, they all look the same, they really don't. I mean, look at Pavel's work, actually. I mean, they're all distinctive. I mean, yes, there are similarities. I mean, the building material is probably similar, because concrete was much cheaper than bricks after the Second World War, not only in the United Kingdom, but around Europe as well. And it was a question how to deal with what was available. And I think the ingenuity of the London County Council after the Second World War, that built the most, and the local metropolitan boroughs, was extraordinary. It was ingenious. Not all of them were perfect. Not all of them were as rich as Camden after 1965, or even Lambeth after 1965, but all of them were doing what they were able to do. And I think it's just extraordinary. It is the variety, it is the differences, it is, okay, all the life is there on the council estates.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And Clem, I'd just like to ask you, because you're one of the people who has expertise of Soviet and Russian architecture and British council houses as well. So how do you think they compare? And can you give us a little bit of the idea of the history?
Yeah, it's kind of you to say that I have expertise. I have more expertise actually with the Russian, but I had one of the great privileges of my life was living on Golden Lane for 10 years. And it really was a privilege every day to wake up in that apartment and understand what it was in the design that made it such an incredible place to live. But to go back to the Soviet, we were talking before, Aysen and I, about what's comparable, what's not comparable, and they're very different social contexts. But what Thaddeus was saying about that short window in which time most of the council housing was built, it was an even smaller window in the Soviet Union from about 54 to 65, when something like 55 million people received apartments. So it was this crazy, intensive conveyor belt of building this uniform housing, which was only meant to survive for 30 years. Khrushchevki, whatever, throughout the Soviet Union, and building these micro regions within towns, which were built around these housing blocks, but they also had communal spaces. Of course, like here, there's been experimentation in housing in the Soviet Union, but talking about just this mass housing, what's interesting is how they're dealing with it. Well, how they're dealing with it now. So about 10 years ago, this new project was introduced in Moscow called renovation. And the plan was to demolish about 10% of the city's housing stock, 10% of the housing stock in total. So a lot of that was Khrushchevki. And what I'm trying to say, I guess, is that this impulse towards mass demolition, like that we see in London, these whole-scale demolition of an estate, for example, in London, that's also been happening in the capitalist kind of world of Moscow. And what's happened there now, I'm not really sure what's happening with the war and increased repressions, that people found a voice to object. So it really became about a campaign being led by the residents. And that wasn't expected by the authorities, because like in this country, there was stigma of the social housing. So they just thought, oh, people will be happy to be rehoused. There was no concept that communities had been formed, that micro-regions had real identities. They had trees, they had pathways, they'd been humanized. So that is that parallel, that in the end, when things come under threat, that people find their voice and they manage to articulate what's important about that place. That's something that's shared.
Great, indeed, thank you. And on that note, Aysen, can you tell us a little bit? So Aysen, has lived on the Aylesbury Estate for 30 years now?
32.
Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about the history of the Aylesbury Estate? And what particularly you've been fighting and your struggle with Southern?
All right. The Aylesbury Estate has been between, the done 60s, 70s, end of 70s. And it's been made by the newly graduate architects. And they've been very thoughtfully thinking of the family base, how family can live in those flats. And it's been very spacious. It's been incredibly wonderful. And none of the places are blocking other building. You all get sun and the loss of green areas. And then the 97, all of you know that, the infamous Tony Blair visit to my block, to saying that, you have forgotten people, we are not. And then that's where he gave the green light to demolish, because this is the brown estate. And suddenly, in the media, everywhere, we start seeing, Aylesbury Estate, Sink Estate is a brown estate. All suddenly, all the kids and all of us became kind of, drug dealers, ganja, they don't work, because they are the working class, all those stigma attached to Aylesbury Estate suddenly. And in the meantime, of course, the council stopped doing the maintenance, all of it, nothing. And over the years, of course, everything is run down, and they came up, let's demolish and rebuild the housing, but for whom? So when we asked, we knew all the yuppie hipster people they want to bring next to the park. And then as a working class family, we don't deserve to occupy that land. And one of the differences from Russia and England, because when you talk about communities here are different. Because here we are minority ethnic communities, not just one couple of people. So what we are experiencing in our life, when we go to work, when we go out of our community, we face racism. But we, in our community, we embrace our differences. You know, that makes the community. And we all are Southwark Council tenants. And it's affected if they, you know, the middle of the winter, if our water heating has been stopped, that's where we all have the same issue. It brings us together. And the main issue, living in the council housing, you will die there. When I moved my flat, 93, I was thinking, I'm gonna die here. Those are my neighbors, this is my community. And suddenly, they are coming because of the profit, only profit, and saying, no, you can't. You can't live here. You have to go out of London. That is the main issue they wanted to do. Because this capitalism, liberal economy does not work any longer. So what is they need to get? And construction. Why do we see construction all over the world? Trying to get more money, trying to get more money, and the push out the working class. That is what we've been having in here. And that is the differences. And why those places are getting demolished, just to profit. For the money, for the hipster and rich people, and we are not going to let them get away. We will fight, we will get what is belong to us because we deserve better.
On which note, I'd just like to read you a quotation I read about Southwark Council recently. Southwark Council is council where the Aylesbury is situated. And this is from Rowan Moore, the Guardian's architecture critic, who says, rather pertinently, I thought, Southwark Council has been played by developers. It's had its tummy tickled, arm twisted, and arse kicked. It got a poor deal in return for its considerable assets. Multiple promises have been broken, and violence done to the lives of the many who live there.
Yes, yes, yes. People are scared to council. And also, we need to think about it. You know, the minority ethnic people already facing this racism, and they don't want to deal with authorities. So that doesn't mean that they don't support you. They support you. That's why we won the campaign. We won the ballot. You know, we went.
So I'm just conscious that some people have some knowledge of the intricacies of things here. Some people don't. So could you tell us a little bit about the ballot and a little bit about the campaign? A bit about that.
So 2000, I started the campaign because I realized that it is the privatization. Then 2001, we had the ballot, official ballot, and 73% of tenants said no to council. We want to stay in our homes and get refurbished. So what happened? So-called democracy we live in. Our democratic rights pushed aside, and then they disregard it. And even the guy on the day come and told me, do you think you won? We're gonna come back. Which they did come back, unfortunately. They did come back. All the money belongs to Aylesbury Estate, 56 million. Then, 2001, I'm talking, allocated the Aylesbury Estate. What they did with money, they hire from outside people, you know, the high wages, to convince tenants to accept the gentrification, the social cleansing, and the whole money spent on that instead of spending on estate, the refurbishing. We are not asking much, but what we are saying that we need to have a decent, safe, dry home for people, low-income people to live in harmony That's all. So they've been keep coming every way. And do you want me to carry on? Or?
Yeah.
Because if I'll take it, I'll go on. It is basically, they took me to court to prevent someone's democratic right to vote, which she did vote. I'm not going to get into detail. But I've been taken to criminal court for a year and for a week in the, the judges, the juries, everything. For what? Nothing. Because she changed her mind. She was supposed to vote for us. And I said, go and use your ballot, vote in the ballot station. I'm not working with the Labour. And they took me to court. And Scotland Yard called me and I said, excuse me, I'm not coming. And they did. And the guy, after the case, the two cases, the one I've been okay, the other one they said 3-year conditional. And that guy followed me. I'm going to the National Film Theatre there. He's there. Hi, Aysen. Are you thinking getting into politics? I've been saying, I am already in politics, but because in their mind, they always think the politics is, what we see, become a councillor, MP. No, I am not like that. As an anarchist, I am out of all those, the formulas, everything, and I'm doing my own things, which I did, and I'm still doing it, and I don't care, even if I die, I'm gonna keep fighting because this is not right. We are, as a working class people, we are fighting for our rights, to get our rights, and they have to recognize that, There is no other way. If we are not getting what we deserve, we'll make the whole society fuss, and nobody can be happy. That's what we will do.
Okay. On that note, actually, round of applause. I'd just like to point out some of the pertinency of what Aysen's saying. I was just reading this morning that actually Lewisham Council is not providing the social housing that it's promised to do. So there's actually going to be a big protest march from here next Saturday against the gentrification and redevelopment of Lewisham. But moving to Pavel now, so I'm conscious that he hasn't said anything yet. And as a Lewisham resident, I'd like to know what sparked your interest in this topic first. And I'd like you also to tell me a little bit about the social housing that you grew up in as well. What is that?
Thank you for the question. Thank you everyone for coming today, and I'm so pleased with that. Yeah, I'll start with the second question. When I grew up, I grew up in the Soviet Union in a small city called Dzerzhinsk, and it was a new social city of 1930s, and the first projects were very close to Ebenezer Gova's Garden City. So it was in the beginning it was like a garden city, and I spent my childhood in one of the social houses. Social houses is maybe the only one form in the cities for housing in the Soviet Union. And this house was built in 1950s, in the late 1950s, but before this Khrushchevka style, before block houses like Khrushchev style block houses. It was quite generous with the space, with the light, and the ceilings were around 3 meters. And I remember the sense of community and transparency, and it was possible to open each door, and the key was under the carpet near the door, and it was like this in my childhood. It was easy to come to your friends, just to knock the door, and it was an open space. And something changed in late 1980s, early 1990s, maybe, I don't know, because it was a changed to new system, to capitalistic system, and all the flats became in private property automatically without right to buy, without
same as we had
just
Thatcher,
automatically everybody became just owner of their own flats. But no big difference because of all the flats on the first floor. People started building special constructions like bars or grills to protect themselves from the robbers, and iron doors everywhere. So something changed, and this sense of community was just vanished. And what I remember from that time. And exactly when I came here, the thing I recognized, there's council estates everywhere, and they're very different, and in very different places, sometimes in unimaginable places. You cannot just imagine that council estate can be here or there, and it's so great. They built it in all the areas, so it was against to make place like a kind of ghetto, to prevent it. And I think the ideas of building these estates here was so generous, and I think Britons have to be proud of these estates.
You think it's one of those post-war ideas like the NHS that we all...
Yes, exactly. So yeah, I think it's a thing to be proud of. Yeah, and that's why I decided I have to do something about it. I have to learn more about these estates, the history of these estates, and I started reading some of the books. And one of the first books was John Bolton's book, Municipal Dreams, and I'm so happy John is with us today. Yeah, and other books. And thank you everyone for your impact to this topic, for helping to survive social houses, and for your attention to this problem.
So you're saying that that first dream of what social housing could be, that bright, glorious post-war dream, that's what attracts you. And I'm curious, and then maybe to open this out to the whole panel, do we think that dream's still there, or has it become more of a nightmare now with gentrification and with the redevelopment or the demolition of housing? So I'm going to start with you, Clem, and ask you of that.
Okay. So I think that insofar as a lot of the housing, these estates that we're talking about still exist, that we can connect with that dream. But I don't think the dream is in the motivation for building now. And the little social housing that's being built is not built to the same quality of design. And we know from these housing estates that good design is very good for the quality of life. We know this to be true. And we also know that a lot of the social housing built now is of incredibly poor quality, and design is a secondary consideration. And we've all heard the stories and seen the reality of the non-social housing having one entrance and the social housing having another entrance, a kind of back door. And we have so much to learn from these buildings about the dream and the design. So what we know is that it's worth spending time on that design, because that's what endures. And a lot of these estates are now listed buildings. They've been recognised as important architectural heritage. But the irony, I mean, when I lived at Golden Lane, a new tower block was built just next to it. And it was built on land that was originally meant to be part of the estate. And there's a conservation management plan for Golden Lane Estate, which is grade 2 listed, Chamberlain, Bonham Powell, built just after the war. Incredible achievement. If you haven't been there, you must go. And it was built in the basements and the rubble of the war. It used this bombed out site. It didn't just totally clear it. I mean, they used a lot of these levels So there's a conservation management plan, and the City of London commissioned it, but for this new tower, which was built next to it, adjacent, they didn't read their own conservation management plan, and they went ahead with this tower, which was just to sort of illustrate the lack of understanding by the own authorities often of what they have. So yes, the vision is embodied in these buildings. We can touch the vision through the buildings and through exhibitions like this, which tell us the story in this narrative form. But I don't believe that this vision is in social housing that's being constructed today.
Okay. And Trish, I just want to ask you, do you agree with that? That vision's dead and gone?
I think something happened actually. I mean, I think it was the cruelty of the Housing Act of 1980 that led to privatization of the social housing stock in the United Kingdom, well, in England in particular, sorry. And that is that the monies in the 40s, 50s and 60s, the building of council estates was financed very simply. Actually, local authority or the London County Council or whoever it was, actually, they applied for something called a loan sanction to the government. From the government, a loan sanction was a very long mortgaged loan, 35, 40, 45 years even. When Margaret Thatcher proposed, I mean, when her cronies proposed actually the right to buy to become the universal right, it was around from the 1930s. It wasn't nothing new actually, but it was the purpose of the right to buy changed dramatically with the 1980 Housing Act, was that the money that was repaid to the Treasury, I think they got 20% local councils, and this money they were not allowed to use it for more council housing or even repairing the council housing, which was really, I mean, in my dictionary, that is cruel. Michael Heseltine, who piloted the legislation through the parliament, he claimed afterwards that he wasn't aware of that. I mean, he was just trying to rewrite the history yet again. But the problem was actually that in 1980, the funding practically ended. I mean, there were still projects for another 5, 6, 7 years, including with Thamesmead. I mean, the final things in Thamesmead were built by the GLC in 1985, a few months before the GLC was abolished. But there was simply no money, and suddenly, as with so many things, not only in the United Kingdom but elsewhere as well, with the right to buy, a housing problem of one generation was solved. But they didn't really think about any generation that came afterwards, including mine or others. So I think there is a lot of very decently designed council housing. The problem was actually that it took the government quite a long time actually to change the rules, that because once, I mean, you just had to stay in a council for 5 years and then you were entitled actually to buy it. Now they changed it to 20 years, I think, which was, and even that is for me is sort of too short, because as it was the case in Norwich, I mean, people just basically, even when they moved into newly built housing council property, they simply said, oh yeah, in 5 years' time, I'll be able to buy it and sell it. And that's exactly what happened. So basically, there is, for instance, slightly further back towards Deptford is Tanner's Hill. Tanner's Hill, I mean, it's an old LCC estate. They started in 1932. It was mostly built by 1939. Then the war came actually, and the final block was built in 1946. And then you can see that was the pre-war, slightly Georgian walk-up sort of places actually that are all around. They were built around London in the late 20s and the 30s. And then there's a beautiful modernist block from 1966. And then, in addition, there's sort of maisonette blocks. Further maisonette blocks are designed by Shepherd, Epstein, and Hunter in the late 60s for the GLC. And it is a state of 4 different parts, but it works brilliantly together. I mean, it's 5 minutes walk from here, actually. It is not as well maintained as it should be. This is the problem with maintenance, because for some reason, as I keep repeating myself with this one actually, but in London in particular, actually they will clean Portland stone every 2 minutes, but they think actually that concrete doesn't need any maintenance, which is not the case. So the problem actually is that no to demolitions, yes to refurbishments, but good solid ones actually. I mean, you can do ingenious things actually. I mean, and as you pointed out actually, people simply assume that Aylesbury Estate over there, so I mean, there is the Wendover block at the back. People simply assume actually, oh yeah, it's forbidding, how horrible, it's concrete. Inside, there's 3, 4, even 5 bedroom maisonette flats, all of them. I mean, this is the most generous provision of social housing in South London. I mean, better than in Thamesmead, and in Thamesmead was basically the epitome of generosity, and there is Thamesmead, and there is Thamesmead everywhere, as it should be. For me, the real problem is to organize financing and release, I mean, and basically return power to the local councils and the London authority, basically to decide actually where they can build, and speed it up. No to, as I said, no to demolitions, yes to building, and yes to maintenance. But maintenance really is the most important thing.
Right. And Aysen, I'd just like to ask you about the specificity even of your dream. So for your dream for Aylesbury, what is it?
It's not a dream, it is the reality that we want Aylesbury Estate to be refurbished, and then to let people go back to their flats and live peacefully, because what is happening here, it's with attacking every council housing, they are trying to get rid of the social state. It is part of it. And also the people are trying to push out the working class, swerving off to London, because all the estates are all over the London and giving a colorfulness, the cheerfulness of the London. What makes London is London, those estates and those communities all around the London. And I don't like to be calling it a dream, because this is what is happening. The council is not maintaining all 20 odd years. And of course the building run down, but they can maintain and refurbish. That's the way it has to go. No demolition, you have to refurbish and let people live in their homes, in their community.
I would just like to say one thing, sorry, about the Aylesbury Estate. And you can see actually how it was done. I mean, it was, the original part was designed in the early 60s, not by, so it was the old pre-1965 Southern Council. Then the first buildings were built in 1963, and then the massive sort of the concrete part actually came between 67, 68 till about 78. Now, the interesting bit was actually, if you look at it, how it was planned, is you have the high rises sort of aligned like this, that sort of low rises in between, and then nothing overlooking the park. The Burgess Park, actually, this is the view from Burgess Park on this big, beautiful painting at the back. It was completely open. You had the glory of this. I mean, and the weirdest thing is, you were looking at the estate from the park and it disappeared. I mean, it was just extraordinary. I don't know if it's a magic of planning or whatever it was. Now, a third of the estate, a quarter of the estate is now being demolished. All the new buildings are high rises next to the park. So basically, you look from the park, and the first thing you see this one ugly building next to the other. You keep looking at it. It is just extraordinary how we all forgot, or somebody forgot actually how to plan properly. I mean, and what was given in the 60s and 70s simply disappeared.
Yes.
Yeah.
And all the spaces, all the green areas, all the trees gone. Yep. Now you can handshake with your next door, because all the buildings next to each other, no sun, nothing. And even I need to tell you, because one of the council meetings, when they were talking about, the high rise, and they were saying that, oh, it's not gonna get sunlight. So what can we put there? All right, we put the elderly people there, and they are saying, but what about the electric cost? This is, in the council meeting and in the hosting meeting, and I asked Harriet Harman, and I said, your councillors are telling this, what you gonna say as a human rights solicitor? What she did, she stand up and left the meeting. Because there is no answer how they can degrade and humiliate people just because we are working class and minority ethnic people. How dare them? That's what I tell them. How dare them?
So I think there are lots of things that we can agree on, and there are lots of things we could talk about the warmth of the communities, the living on the estates, the space, how spaces have shrunk from flats that were originally quite decent size, the paucity of maintenance. There are lots of things we could talk about, but I'm conscious that we have a wonderful audience who haven't had a chance to ask any questions yet. So does anybody have any questions?
What a statement.
Give us a statement, Richard.
You have to know I was advised not to ask a question of any length.
I'm very sorry.
So I met these guys by accident, more or less. And I watched Aylesbury being built, and I watched the clearances for the Haygate. I lived in Chatham Street in 1967. So I get it all. I think the thing that's amazing about coming in here is I'm an artist. There's a lot of art now which is kind of what I would describe as problematically shrill. It declares itself to be political. I would say that all art is political because it's the private which escapes anyway. So we're not going to do that now. But what's extraordinary about coming in here is you're near a thoughtful artist, and it's this astonishing show. And I think what's extraordinary is that it permissions this conversation. And maybe what I'm trying to say is that I think that what you're all talking about is a staggering cultural crisis, which has been running probably since the last people who got shot at in the war were no longer in politics. So that would be, they were still in Thatcher's administration. So I'm not speaking as a left-right position. I just think that this, I'm sorry, I'm English, but if you're English, you probably know that the war ended in 1945. For sure you know we didn't win it. You know the Russians won it. We didn't lose it. It's not often spoken of, but it's true. And then you've got 25, 30 years of people who shared that experience in one way or another. And that was in our cultural turf. However you took it, you could feel it. And then I guess your 1980 point is it starts to evaporate. I mean, I say, just as a sort of historical note, I'm contributing something. I'm not asking.
Thank you for your contribution.
Are there any other statementy, questiony, the guy in the beige jacket there? Yeah.
Thanks for the talk. And my kind of question was about how I think, or at least I feel like the art has something to do with memory. As a born bred, kind of growing up in literally these months by the other former council estate buildings, and I've grown up with a lot of memories around. I think part of what I see in these works is about how there's a kind of psychological attack when something you remember and have some attachment to is demolished. And part of it was, so to speak, is that could you speak more about that sort of thing?
Yeah, thank you for your question. With pleasure. Yeah, I think it's important to say that from my point of view, I came from a very different background. I grew up in a very different background, and I came from another country. From another much bigger utopia which failed, and I see it from another prospect. And for me, it's like the whole phenomena. It seems that from that distance, I can see it like a phenomena. This council, this housing movement, like something as a whole thing. And I think I can use this maybe preference, I don't know, with this distance. I think distance is the most important thing for the artist. You have to step back for 1 or 2 steps to see the whole thing, because you cannot see it from a short distance. And I use this to start this story. Maybe I'll continue that with some more personal stories. I would like to do it. I would like to make something maybe closer to people, to real people. Maybe I'm thinking about a series of portraits of council estates and to collect their memories and stories. But as a first step, I want to do this as a whole thing, to tell the story of it, how I see it from my distance.
Any other questions?
Hi, Bo. It's questions on AW/Woods. Save us last questions, last thoughts. Obviously, I can apply. More interested in me is that come from
social council estate. I think that in 2007 it's 80. And what he said about the dreams and its reality, really right, y'all pretty dark and sensitive, like having these sources, for example.
I'm representing my past, I feel like with what's the part of art in general, how I mean generate
something to really make action sense. And so it's like, how do we actually get our communities in these type of places?
See these things. So I'm representing that, so my whole block that might, there's a lot because there was fun in general. And then there was people I try and know how he activate that space, how we generate, especially in start with the distracted birds spinning the wall. Or matter how to push this, we produce and like lotion. How would you bring that? Do not need to go. So open this up.
I bet, yeah. So how basically how do we become activists, really? So I think everybody's probably got an answer to that, but I think the most obvious person, and I'll give that, is sitting to my left. So I'm going to pass that on there.
My friend, the first things, the simply, the leaflet and distribute to community and door knocking, talking to your neighbors, because end of the day, everybody knows what's going on. But sometimes people, the working or scared, don't want to take a step, but they will support you. Just simply, why this is happening to us? Because we are minority, because we are working class. That is the attack. That is the specifically reason they are attacking our homes, because of that. So the people which they know, the most of the people thinks that, that they don't realize. Of course they do. And tell them how it's affecting people's mental health, not knowing what is going to happen, when and how, and you don't get any maintenance, you don't get any things, and then it is causing a mental health issue, which is the GPs are talking about, it's gone up. Rightly so, because if you don't know your home is safe or not, if how long you're gonna be there, how can you be living comfortably or doing something in your home, because you don't know when they're gonna tell you, Tama, this is the day, get out. All those things. Just simply, you don't need the very big wording, my friend. Just simply write it how you think the things are happening, why it's happening, and then distribute and talk to your neighbors, door knocking, talking to people. When I had exhibition 3 years ago in my flat, many young people came to exhibition and saying that I used to live, such a estate, in that estate, and coming back to seeing and asking, is there anything we can do? Those young people always get stigmatized. Unfortunately, that is one of the things, it's, that burdens me, because I live with those stigmatized people, so-called drug dealing, everything. No, because I witness, they grow up in front of my eye. They ask me to have to carry my bags, but from outside, the whole society looking in a different way. Don't bother. Just grab your community and try to do anything and everything for your community, my friend.
Yeah. And on that note, I'm also going to turn to Clem, because I know Clem's run a few successful campaigns as well, so I think she might be able to tell you something about campaigning successfully.
Are you living on, is it under threat in some way where you live, or what's the main kind of issue? Okay. Okay. So what can be really helpful is finding out a bit about the history of the place, because if you can tell a story about it, it really helps. Good photos really help, like just with your phone, but just like photos that make it look in a good light. I mean, not to sort of overwhelm you, because I totally agree, it's about connecting with other people, but of course press or social media, petitions are really good. They're quite easy to get going, like change.org, and people like petitions, and that's a news story that you can then tell either the local paper or social media site of some kind. But yeah, have a group of allies, of people from your estate. And something that can happen when you campaign is that people can fall out with each other. And it's quite important to like keep that in mind, so that either you can prevent that or not worry about it too much if it happens, because it's really normal, because it's really stressful. But yeah, learning a bit about the place and the architects or anything about the history gives you huge power, because people usually don't know it. And in the council, they don't normally know it. And they're like, oh, this is a thing, this is a place, this has a heritage, we didn't know that. And then all stories of people who live there, like they don't have to be famous, but there might be something remarkable about them, that they're this many generations or this many kids or whatever it is, or artists or whatever, just stories about people around you as well. So there's all sorts of ways, and also to find groups that can support you, like Save Britain's Heritage, pressure groups that exist that can give you a bit of support and advice. You're not on your own, that people have done it before.
And if I can abandon my semi-impartial role as moderator, I'd just like to say the first person through the door this morning was a lovely lady called Damas with her son William, who was telling me the story of her social housing estate, which was near Greenwich. And it's run by Clarion, who, as we discussed before, Clarion are one of the most notorious people to deal with. And they were completely overcharging her. And what was effective for her was ITV got involved, and they did a sort of investigation into how many tenants were being overcharged. The other thing that was the most successful thing for her, old school, she wrote to her MP. Her MP wrote back. Her MP, they've had a dialogue. The MP got in touch with Clarion. So, you've got, if you're a David, you've got a Goliath behind you and he's going to interfere. That helped. The last thing that really helped was, again, she talked to all her neighbours. She realised she wasn't the only person in this situation. And so they could start thinking about bringing a class action to say, no, there's enough to stuff here.
And keep all your emails. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah. John.
Well, thank you, first of all, for really interesting panel discussion. Pavel, thank you for some really stunning artwork. It's I'm always sometimes a bit skeptical about artists and council housing, but I think done a beautiful job in creating a kind of utopian vision, but that's something a vision of modernist housing as a promise of the future, and a bit home, which is, as Thaddeus says, you know that, and as we've heard, is the essence of capital housing. I'm not sure. I've actually been struggling to think of a sort of an incisive contribution. I think one of the interesting things, of course, is the huge attitudinal shift. So we talk about politics of 1980, the Housing Act and so on. Of course, that's huge, but it's kind of almost secondary, I think. Or at least it's an effect rather than a cause. So obviously, in 1981, 1 in 3 population lived in capital home. If you were part of that early post-war generation, there's a 1 in 2 chance that you spent part of your life in capital housing. So in that era, that 44 decades or so after the Second World War, capital housing wasn't other. It was something that most people experienced either directly or through close friends and relatives. And I think what's happened since 1980s, that's happened in terms of what's happened socially and economically to capital housing and its community. So what's happened ballistically, but privatization itself, is that capital housing is still seen as now increasingly seen as something that is other and separate, and we've lost that sense of the public will and public benefit and public good. And I think that's powerful. You struggle with it, because people don't have that sense of not only a state community, but sort of a broader national and social community. And that's a depressing observation. But I think that's part of what, Aysen is struggling with. I visited Murzeev Museum 3 years ago. It's great. I suppose, actually, in terms of that, but obviously for you, and Fine Stad and Nimrati, southern capital is the Edinburgh. Yeah, I get that. But I think as an historian, what I find, and it was never perfect. It was paternalistic, it was top down, and they made mistakes. But capitals really wanted to build housing. They wanted generally to build good housing. And they were, broadly speaking, enabled and empowered to do that through public investment, through legislation and so on. So I think Thaddeus referenced this. But, how do we get back to that era when local councils, they had planners and architects, they had resources and finance, and they had a political will to build. To at least enable and liberate that, we need to have central government, because they're a highly too centralised political system, but we need Westminster to actually really spread and diversify that power, and actually give power back both to councils and to people. Yeah.
I'm going to just have the last word. Well, I'm not going to have the last word. I'm actually going to give the last word to Thaddeus, because I'm going to read the last sentence of your book. So I thought it was rather amazing. Okay. You said, council housing, often hidden in plain sight, is arguably the best gift that architects have bequeathed London. Just as importantly, it's contributed immeasurably, not only to the architectural, but to the social fabric of the capital.
Well, thank you.
More of it. I'd just like to thank our incredible panel, Thaddeus, Aysen, Clem, and especially to Pavel for bringing us here in the Brulino Cup.
Yeah.